I want to welcome everyone today again. My name is Jason Beres. I'm a Senior VP at DevTools. Graham Murray is with me. He's Senior Architect. He is leading our Xamarin.Forms effort, Xamarin, as well as native UI controls. And then we have Mike James, who's joining us from the UK, and he's a technical evangelist with Xamarin. So he's going to talk about the Xamarin product, and then Graham and I will talk about how Infragistics fits in. So with no further delay, I am actually going to pass it right over to Mike, and he is going to walk us through some information about Xamarin, and he's going to do a demo on Xamarin.Forms, and then he'll pass it back to us over here in the U.S. office. So Mike, you can take it away.
Wonderful, thank you. Share my screen, here we go. So let me get rid of this.
We might need to give it just a few seconds to let the latency issues here.
Okay. Let me know when you can see the screen. Dun, dun, dun.
Not quite yet.
Funny, we can actually see in the questions panel, people are kind of letting us know ahead of time. Some people can see it, some of them are cut off.
Interesting. Okay, well I can start talking at least. So I'm going to be giving a basic introduction to Xamarin.Forms, an introduction on why you should use it and under what situation you should use it versus developing with the traditional Xamarin approach, as well as covering what actually is Xamarin.Forms. So there are some considerations that you should make before jumping into developing with Xamarin.Forms versus the traditional approach. It's worth noting that Xamarin.Forms is an abstraction API which is built on top of the traditional Xamarin approach. So the traditional Xamarin approach is a one-to-one mapping to the platform APIs. So anything you can do in Objective-C or Java, you could do in C# using Xamarin.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
On your screen, you have it in full screen, but it looks like we only see about a quarter of it. I don't know if that's because of this going through the VPN. Is there a way you can just kind of resize that so we can see? I don't know why we're.
I've seen that before if you've got a DPI scaling turned on.
Oh, I definitely do have DPI scaling. I'll have to sign out and sign back in order to fix that, though.
Unfortunately, I think that's.
Yeah, maybe just hide your ribbon and hide the left-hand list of slides, and we could probably see it better that way.
Yeah, it looks like it's just being cut off on the far right and bottom. So it's getting there. Actually, if you go over to the left a little more, looks like it.
Try and put it in the upper quarter of your screen, upper left-hand quarter.
Perfect.
There we go. Looks good.
Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, so I'm using a Surface Pro, so that would explain the high DPI issue.
Okay.
I don't think Microsoft have quite figured out how to release high DPI screens which work perfectly, because I've had issues with other software as well. But anyway, I digress. So there, as I said, there are a few considerations to make before you start down a Xamarin.Forms project versus a traditional project. So we at Xamarin think that Xamarin.Forms is an amazing technology for data-driven apps. So if you're trying to create kind of a Dropbox style of application, you know, a Twitter style application where you're pulling in a feed and you're displaying it in a list, then Xamarin.Forms is perfect. It's also very good for proof of concepts and creating prototypes, as well as apps where you care more about code reuse than you do creating beautiful custom UIs. So often I kind of suggest if you were going to go down the hybrid approach, then you clearly don't care too much for how the app's going to look on the end device, then Xamarin.Forms could be a good fit for you. Or if you're shipping this app internally to employees and you're not putting it on the App Store and looking to get an Apple Design Award, then again, Forms is probably a great solution for you. But if you're interested in creating a beautiful customized app that's highly polished and you're happy to sacrifice a little bit of code sharing, then the traditional option is probably the way to go. And when I say sacrifice a little bit of code sharing, with the traditional approach, you can share up to 75% of your C# code across all 3 platforms. So that's iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. So you've got this 75% C# code that you're sharing across platforms, and that's anything that's going to be touching the base class libraries. So that's system.link, system.xml, system.io. And then you create your user interface once for iOS with storyboards, once for Android with Android XML, and then you use XAML for Windows Phone. To be honest, you'd probably use something like Expression Blend in order to create a beautiful UI. But the key point is that you get a UI designer. With Xamarin.Forms, we can take that 75% code reuse and shove it all the way up to 99.9% code reuse. So you're sharing far more code because you're now able to share the UI code. And we do this through this abstraction API. So we looked at the common controls across all 3 platforms. So we found they all had tab views, they all had list views, they all had map views, and they all had buttons and sliders, and you get the idea. But each of these controls has a unique API, and they're effectively doing the same thing. So what Xamarin.Forms does is it abstracts the differences away from you so that you can deal with a consistent API but still have access to these native controls. So Xamarin.Forms allows you to quickly and easily build 100% native apps while sharing, as I say, 99.9% of your code across the platforms. And I'd love to tell you that it's 100% code reuse, but the reality is it's always going to come out as 99.9%, even in the best case situation, because there's at least a couple of lines of initialization within each platform project that's unique to that specific platform. But in terms of the code that you write as a developer, you can still write 100% cross-platform code. But when we analyze the solution as a whole, it's always going to come out as 99.9%. And the really important thing with Xamarin.Forms is that this isn't our approximation of what a button should look like on iOS or how a button looks on Android. These are real native controls, so you get the native behaviors with them. This means that, if Apple decide that they're going to do a complete overhaul of iOS 9 and change the entire look of it, you can just, rebuild your app, and you're going to get all of those changes straight away. You're not going to have to wait for someone to go out and recreate all of that new styling in CSS. So it's a huge bonus through actually delivering a native app while sharing your code. So let's take a look at what's included in Xamarin.Forms. So you get 40 pages, layouts, controls, and you can build these from code behind or with XAML. So if you're a Windows developer and you've been developing modern apps or previously Silverlight and WPF apps, then you're already going to know XAML, and you're going to feel right at home with the MVVM approach. So because we have that MVVM approach, we of course get two-way data binding. Now it's worth mentioning, if you're an MVC developer, you can still use Xamarin.Forms. The MVVM, to me, when I develop using MVVM, it really does feel like cheating because it removes all of that boilerplate code of updating your UI when your model changes and vice versa. So I highly recommend all of those MVC developers just go and grab a book on MVVM or read the documentation that Microsoft's provided because it makes programming feel like, well, so easy that you feel like you're cheating. So of course, because we've got MVVM, we've got this two-way data binding, which we know and love. We're going to give you a consistent navigation and animation API across all of the platforms. And if there's particular features on the platform that you want to get access to, so for example, if you wanted to do text-to-speech, well, that's been implemented differently across all three platforms, as you would expect. They have different APIs. And it's not strictly a UI problem to solve, so Xamarin.Forms doesn't solve that for you, but we give you the tools in order for you to still access those APIs from within your Xamarin.Forms solution. So you would use a dependency service for this. And then on the side, we've got the messaging center. And the messaging center enables view models and other components to communicate with each other without actually having to know anything about each other besides a simple message contract. So this means you can create highly decoupled code, which avoids spaghetti code, which is what we want to avoid at all cost, really. So let's have a look at the pages. Now, normally these would all animate in quite nicely, but alas, the animations, or at least the high DPI scaling, has stopped that. So with the pages in Xamarin.Forms, you've got a few to get you started. You've got a content page, master detail, navigation, tabs, and carousel. Now, if we take tabbed pages, for example, I like to talk about these because this is just a great way to prove that it really is native. For iOS, tabs naturally live at the bottom of your screen. And on Android, they live at the top. And then on Windows Phone, you're going to have a pivot control. Now, because Xamarin.Forms really does just map to the native control, when we say, hey, we want to show a tabs page, please, the OS is going to just give us a native tab view, and it's going to make sure that that's, you know, at the bottom of the screen for iOS, at the top for Android, and it's pivot control for Windows Phone. We don't actually have to explicitly say where these controls live because they're the native controls. But in terms of how we can deal with layouts, in Xamarin.Forms, we've given you a number of layouts to get you started. So you get stack, absolute, relative, grid, content view, scroll view, and frame. Now, I do most of my work in a stack layout, and that's because when I'm developing with Xamarin.Forms, I'll be honest, it tends to be a proof of concept. I feel much more at home in that traditional approach where I'm using the UI designers. But I know people that are developing fully fledged apps with Xamarin.Forms, so it is definitely possible. But as I say, I tend to stick mostly in stack layouts because it's going to deal with the resizing of controls for me to a higher degree than something, say, like an absolute layout, which requires a more granular control to get things looking beautiful. So you can see there you've got a lot of options available to you. So these are the controls that are available to you within Xamarin.Forms. Now they're not, obviously we've not mapped to every single control that's available across the platforms. This is just a subset of the controls that we found were common and it made sense to make an abstraction for. And for example, with a button, on iOS, when you tap a button, the event is actually touched up inside. Well, that doesn't really make any sense to Android or Windows Phone. So we've abstracted that event, and we've called it clicked. So as you would expect, it's button.click event. So we've got this consistent API that you can use in order to interact with these controls. Now, you may be thinking that the gap at the end is just where I've forgotten one or I should have resized it to all fit perfectly. But this gap is actually where you add third-party controls, such as the Infragistics controls, as well as going on to NuGet and looking at the controls the community is creating. Obviously, you also have the option of generating your own controls if you wanted. So you're not limited by the controls that are available to you out of the gate that comes with Xamarin.Forms. You also have the option to add third parties. So if you're interested in learning, you know, in detail Xamarin.Forms and about the APIs, we've got an amazing book. That's, I think we're now on preview 2. I think we're hoping to get this released by the summer. But this is written by Charles Petzold, who is a very famous author in the industry. So you've probably read one of his books, at least one of his books already. So you can grab a copy of this book for free. It's a free download. And I highly recommend just going through it, and you'll get a feel for what the APIs can allow you to do. But let's start with a quick demo. Now this may be tricky with the DPI situation, so I'm going to resize Visual Studio, and hopefully we'll be able to see what's going on. Let me have a quick look. Looks great there?
Yeah, looks good.
Perfect. So in Visual Studio, we would want to go File, New Project, as always. And because Xamarin.Forms is an abstraction API, it's built on top of that traditional approach. We're going to want to make sure we've got, Xamarin Android and Xamarin iOS, as well as the Windows Phone SDKs installed. So you can see here I've got Xamarin iOS, so I could make an Apple Watch app, or I could go into Xamarin Android, and you can see I can make a Wear app, because wearables are where it's at right now. But we would want to select mobile apps for a Xamarin.Forms project. And we've got two options, really. We have the option of a portable class library, or as Miguel says, a pickle. And then we've got the option of a shared library. Now, I do all of my work in a portable class library. I kind of think shared libraries are a bit of a cheaty way of doing it, because what a shared library is doing is just doing file linking at compile time. So I just like to do everything, all code I write now, and I just like to write it in a portable class library. So that's the way I would suggest you do it. But if you want to get more information on which you should choose, then go on to our documentation and have a read, because it goes into details, in much more detail than I'll go into today. So I created a project this morning. I came on the train from Birmingham in England, not Birmingham, Alabama, and I set myself 30 minutes to write a sample app, just to show how quickly we can get things started. And I wanted to target Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. Now, I lived in Belgium for a little while. I think it was kind of 7 or 8 months. And I'm a huge fan of Belgian beer. So I thought I'd write a sample app that shows a list of beers, and we can dig into some detailed information. So that's what I've got here. And when you create a Xamarin.Forms solution in Visual Studio, it's going to create 4 projects for you. You're going to get your portable class library, which you can see here. And then you're also going to get platform projects. So one for Android, one for iOS, and then one for Windows Phone. Now these 3 projects, platform projects, you're not really going to need to interact with a great deal. You'll set the icon, and you'll set properties that allow you to come up with metadata correctly within the app stores. But you shouldn't really need to be writing code within these platform projects. Most of your work is going to be done within the portable class library. So I always like to start at the bottom of an app and work up. So let's have a look at the model. This is just, generic C#. There's nothing Xamarin.Forms related here, but it allows you to see exactly what information I'm storing about the beers. So I've got, the name, how strong it is with the ABV, is it in stock, and what style. Now, this beer is referenced within our view model. And our view model really couldn't get any simpler than this. It's an observable collection with the type of beer, and I've got some dummy data. Now, I'll be honest, the 30 minutes on the train when I was creating this sample, a good 15 minutes of it was creating this dummy data and waiting for my tethered device to actually get on the internet and find the images. But the dummy data really just goes out and pulls some information from the cloud. There's nothing exciting happening there, so we won't dig into that. But this view model is used by the views. Now, as I mentioned before, you can create views from code behind in C# or in XAML. So if you're an existing C# developer that's never written any XAML before, and you think, well, I'm not sure I want to jump into XAML just yet, we've got you covered. You can create all of your views in C#. And so the list view that I've created with this code behind. So this is all C#. You can see I inherit from content page, and then I set some properties. So, for example, the title, I want it to be beers. And I know that the first page I want to be a list view. So I create a new list view, which is a Xamarin.Forms type. And I want to create an instance of my view model. And the reason I want to create an instance of my view model is I want to set the item source of the list to be the viewModel.beers, so that observable collection. Now, where the MVVM approach comes in really handy is this idea of data binding. So you can see here my list has got some cells, and I said I want it to be the type of image cell or aspect image cell. And that's got the ability to set the bindings to the controls that are available to us within the cell. So I'm saying the text property, which is effectively B, the title property, I want to bind to name. And then you see details to brewery, and then image source to image. So these properties are actually just found in the model of beer, but I'm not actually having to tell it, to display that information for me other than setting this binding. And obviously, when you get two-way data binding, it becomes super powerful. So you can see this is, pretty easy code to do. It shouldn't be too difficult for anybody that's above an entry-level C# developer. But let's have a look at the XAML approach. Now, I always like to jump into the code behind when I'm showing off the XAML approach. Because if you're doing MVVM correctly, then your code behind can really just be one line of code that you write, which is this, setting the data, the binding context. And I'm setting this to beer, because when I instantiate the details page, I pass in the currently selected beer. Now that binding context then allows us to do the data binding from within the XAML. So let's go ahead and look at the XAML. So you'll see here we've got this binding. So the title is bound to the name of that beer. So just like before with the C#, you saw me doing the set binding. This is effectively doing the same. I'm just setting the binding to the name. And here I'm setting the binding to brewery. And I set it again on the image, so the image source. Very simple stuff here. But the idea in this demo is just to show you that you've got a couple of options within using Xamarin.Forms. If you're comfortable in C#, just write entirely your UIs in C#. If you love XAML and you love the MVVM approach, then just rock that. But I've got this app running on the devices, so let's actually take a look at this. He says, hopefully it will load. Here we go. So this is the code running on Android emulator. You can see it's fetching some beer information from that dummy data. It's all Belgian beers because that's what I know and love. And we can click on it and we'll go to the detail view and we can see more information. So got a lovely image there. And let's see how this looks on Windows Phone. So we'll bring this over. We'll select the trapeze. We can say, is it in stock? No, it's not in stock. And this is all exactly the same code that's created these two apps. And then we can also add in the iPhone as well. Now, I'm not sure how easy it's going to be for you guys to see this. I'll try and drag it up to the top left. He says, I'm waiting for my screen to update here, so it's no doubt taking longer to update on yours. So the situation with building any Xamarin app for iOS from Visual Studio is that you're going to need a Mac build host. So what I've done here is I've actually VCN'd into my Mac, which is just sat next door to my to my Surface Pro. So normally I would just, deal directly with the Mac in this situation. I would hit run in Visual Studio and then switch over to the Mac. Alternatively, some people will run Windows and Visual Studio in a VM running on a Mac. So there are numerous options, but you need the Mac there in order to use the built-in simulator and deploy to the devices. So let's go ahead and click on the Leffy Brunn, which is a nice dark ale, and we'll say it's in stock. So we can now bring up this is exactly the same app running across 3 platforms with one source code or one solution. So this is 99.9% code reuse, which is just phenomenal. And as I say, this took about 30 minutes to build, and 15 minutes of that was just finding images that looked reasonable, because I was tethered on 3G, hurtling through the country to get down to Surrey. So that's Xamarin.Forms very briefly. And I'll pass back to Jason and the Infragistics guys to cover their awesome controls and how you can utilize some third-party controls to make your apps even more awesome. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Mike. So we have a, hey Mike, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. We have a couple questions maybe we can just look at right now. And you mentioned the difference between a shared or a portable project. So when would you use one? Why? What's the difference? How would you recommend, etc.?
So the portable class libraries, they're a subset of .NET. So there are going to be some classes that aren't available to you within the portable class libraries that would be available to you if you were doing the file linking. And the reason they're available to you in the file linking is because we're using different profiles in Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android. So my general feeling is if you've got existing .NET code that you can't run in a portable class library because those classes are missing, then you probably want to go down that shared route as a temporary solution. My feeling is that you should always try and get your code updated to run within a portable class library, because then you can run it almost anywhere. So there are pros and cons to each approach. Portable class libraries can be a bit more limiting in terms of the APIs that are available to you, but I've yet to hit a roadblock that I couldn't get around when using a pickle, as Miguel would say.
Okay. And then what about the new Windows tablet, Windows Universal? Is there a story there with the Xamarin.Forms?
So we've just added Windows support. The new Universal story, I'm not 100% sure on what the situation is. I know it's on our radar, but I'm not sure if it's on the roadmap. But given, I don't keep up with all of the roadmaps for engineering, because then I'd start leaking information. But just on a hunch.
Yeah, in webinars, exactly.
Yeah, exactly that. But just on a hunch, the fact that we've already started the Windows side of things already suggests to me that, taking my Xamarin employee hat off and just looking at this pragmatically, that it's probably on the radar longer term to make sure we've got that supported.
And is there a map API?
There is a map API. So obviously you would instantiate a map, and on iOS you get an Apple map, so good luck to your users actually finding your destination. Then on Android you get Google Maps, and on Windows Phone you get Bing Maps.
Okay. And then one last one, let me see here. The book from Charles, is this available for download today?
Yep, so that's been available for about 6 months now. Preview 2 was released a little while ago. So yeah, completely free to download today.
Okay, cool. So just go to Xamarin.com and you can find it over there?
Absolutely.
All right, good. So we'll probably come back with some more questions as we keep going, but I'll go through a few things here and then we'll do another demo. So,
perfect.
So thanks for that, Mike. That was really a sweet demo, and now I think we all understand Belgian beers more. They seem to be a lot more interesting than New Jersey beers. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
I live very close to the Climax Brewing Company.
Oh, really?
And that's kind of an interesting name.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Microbrew there.
How do they taste?
Yeah,
it's okay.
It's euphoric.
All right. So with Infragistics and basically what we do here, many of you know us or are existing customers, but we really do try to focus on ensuring that you can not only meet user expectations but exceed user expectations. So our vision from our products across the board is really to make outstanding UX an everyday occurrence in the enterprise. And the cool thing for us is when we got wind of Xamarin.Forms, we had already been working with Xamarin for quite a while on Xamarin bindings in our native Android and iOS controls, and this sort of fits in perfect with our strategy overall. Because when you look at the enterprise apps that you need to build today, it's not just limited to maybe a responsive web design in HTML. It's not just limited to a Windows Phone app or a desktop app. You really do need to look at all of the platforms, and native mobile becomes extremely important. And there's a lot of reasons for that, not only from just a performance perspective, but the overall user experience. If you are delivering, if your goal is to deliver a great UX, you want it to be per platform. So you want a responsive web app to feel like a responsive web app on a browser. You want an Android app to feel like an Android app on an Android phone or tablet. And Xamarin.Forms really helps with that when you start getting into the native platform. So the UX actually matches the platform, as we just saw in Mike's demo, where you had the very specific Windows Phone view, you had a very specific Android view, and you had a specific iOS view. And so when you are delivering applications, your users don't have to think about it, they don't have to learn, they don't have to try to understand kind of what you're trying to deliver in the apps they're just used to using, because they're used to using the phones. So when we think about what Infragistics offers from a mobile perspective, let me give this a second to pop up. There's some latency on our end here. What we've had in the market for quite a while is Windows Phone controls, obviously. We've had an iOS product in the market now for over 2 years, so that's really a fairly mature product. And then we introduced an Android product about 1.5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. We re-engineered that to a newer version. We updated it, and what we do across all of our native mobile products is we do code translation and code sharing. So similar to the experience that you get with Xamarin.Forms, where you write it once in C# and you get the native output, if you're working with our UI controls, be it in Objective-C, be it in Java, be it in C#, you're going to have the same API, you're going to have the same experience, the same feature set. So our goal is to help you deliver that experience without making you learn new controls for every single platform. And this even stretches over to our HTML5 product, Ignite UI, and our XAML products in WPF. So if you are very specifically just trying to build an iOS app or just an Android app, we have those products. So you can download our iOS product. It's called Nucleus, and you can go to town. The nice thing is we have Xamarin bindings across the board for our native controls in iOS and in Android. So we support the Xamarin.Forms story, but we also support the story of, hey, you just want to build a really sweet high-end iOS app for your high-net-worth customers or for your gaming app or whatever it might be, and we deliver the full range of UI controls there with Xamarin bindings. Now, what our message is around Xamarin.Forms, since we historically at Infragistics have been entrenched in the Visual Studio market, we've been in business for 25 years, and we've kind of always been that really tight Microsoft partner. We look at this as a massive opportunity for the Visual Studio developer who has great skill sets in C#, has been doing XAML, to now be able to build out native UI. So you don't have to go and necessarily learn Objective-C. You don't necessarily have to go learn Java. You don't have to understand all the inner workings of the platform. You can use Visual Studio, you can use Xamarin.Forms, and you will output native projects. So I think Mike did a great demo there, and he really sort of showed off that with all C#, you have a cool application, and of course there's different scenarios where you might use Xamarin.Forms, where you might use the Xamarin runtime, where you might go straight to right to the metal with using Objective-C with Xamarin. It's really up to you. All of your options are there, but we see this when I go talk to customers. It's really about, hey, how do I use all of my Visual Studio skill and knowledge in my development teams, not having to retrain them and get the benefit of a rich mobile experience. So with Xamarin.Forms, what we've done is we've taken our actually, I'm just looking at the questions. Are the slides available for further reading? Yes, all of this will be posted the minute we're done. Just check out blogs.infragistics.com and you can grab the slides. But what we've done at Infragistics is we've taken a big gap in the market, and that's around rich data visualization, and we've put that over to Xamarin.Forms, and also a more robust, rich grid experience. So if you're doing any type of application that needs a virtualized grid, that needs features like column pinning, that needs features like selection, that's a rich cross-platform control we've built for native. And if you need applications that do any type of data visualization, so you're doing dashboards, you're doing financial apps, marketing dashboards, sales dashboards, you want to do a fitness tracker and show some pie charts to show your progress in an application, we have really the leading data visualization product on the market, as well now across all of the platforms, be it Xamarin.Forms or any of the other ones I mentioned around HTML5, XAML, etc. So I just have a few screenshots here that kind of demonstrate some of the things that you can do. So when this guy comes up, some of you may see it, some of you may not. This is a new sample that we just shipped, I believe yesterday. We sent out the email blast, and we've built a really rich global sales dashboard. So what we do at Infragistics is we build a lot of showcase samples, we call them, which are, we go through a UX process. So for example, for the global sales dashboard, we interview and we talk to salespeople. We understand what's important to them, what they need. We use Indigo Studio, our prototyping tool, and we go ahead and we build these samples. This particular example is Xamarin.Forms. You can download the code today. I have the links at the end of the presentation. But you can actually see how we built it, how the controls are used, how Xamarin.Forms layout controls are used, how our UI controls are used. And our goal is really that if you need a sales dashboard or any of the types of samples that we're shipping, you just swap it out for your data and use all of our styles, all of our design, etc., because we did the work, the UX work, to make sure it was right. This second example I wanted to show is sort of another dashboard view. This one's pretty slick. We actually showcased this last year at Xamarin Evolve, running on every possible device that we had. This is showing some gauges, some polar charts, and different types of UI, but it also has different interactions. So you can think of this as a really slick sort of dashboard view. There's all kinds of animations happening. So if you download our Xamarin.Forms product, you'll get this sample as well, and it kind of shows you step by step how to build it. So next up, financials. So we've built, we're really strong in the financial markets. If you look at the top banks in the world, they're standardizing on the Infragistics tool sets. High volume, high data scenarios. So this is an example that we originally built in WPF and Silverlight many years ago based on some work we were doing for one of the banks, and we translated it now over to Xamarin.Forms. We have it in HTML5, but this is a really slick example of connecting into a real data service. I believe this uses Yahoo Finance data. It uses a bunch of different financial chart types. But when you look at this sample, which again is available in our product, you can understand how to do that data connectivity. You can understand how to update the screens in real time. So you have some more interesting learnings there. And then this example here is a kind of a slick UI pattern that we invented here. This is an app that you can download from the App Store. It's free. It's called SB Viz, like the letter S, the letter B, and then Viz, V-I-Z. And what we did here was we used a chart to represent every play and every quarter and every down of every Super Bowl since the Super Bowl started, 20, 30 years ago. So the idea with this is it's just another really good example of taking a data visualization, doing something fairly innovative with it, and using it in a mobile app. This is just another example of the chart. I'll skip over that. And then finally, this last screenshot before we start getting into some code is these are some samples that we're running across Android and Windows Phone. These are available for download as well. These are all in the product. But it just shows you some of the different views that you can get on the mobile devices. And I think we're like a little bit behind on the latency here, so just bear with me. If you see a yellow Nokia 920 in the middle, that means you're on the right screen. I think everyone should see it now. All right, good. I see yellow. So with that, what I'm going to do is you've seen some examples. You kind of understand what we're offering. I'll answer a couple questions really quick. All of our Xamarin controls are in our product called Infragistics Professional. So Infragistics Professional gives you our iOS product, our Android product, our Windows products, and our Xamarin product. So you need that to be able to build these out for every single platform. The name of the app again, and we'll put this in the blog, is called SB Viz. letter S, letter B, VIZ for visualization. And that's something that you can grab from the iOS App Store right now. And so all of these products, someone asked a question about professional versus ultimate. They're all in the ultimate product, and they're all in the professional product. So you get that as well. And they're all trial versions too, so you can just go download these guys and use them as a trial. So I'm going to pass it over to Graham. Graham's actually going to walk us through integrating an Infragistics controls into a Xamarin project, similar to what Mike was doing, but just using our controls.
Okay, this is going to be very interesting if it's still as lagged as it was, although it seems like it's a lot better. I guess maybe there was some sort of weird issue with PowerPoint.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay. So I was going to start by showing you, and we'll see if it cooperates, because the network was being a bit of a pain yesterday. I was going to start by showing you how you would get the Infragistics controls, provided that you've downloaded our trial, or you already own our product, or you decide to buy our wonderful product. You know, provided that you have our components, how you would get those into a Xamarin.Forms product. So what we provide with our trial or our release version of the product is we provide all the raw DLLs, all the raw assemblies that you would need to get your project up and running. Or we provide some NuGet packages. We don't publish those in a public NuGet stream right now because, you know, we sell our product for money, and so you know, there's some interesting scenarios with you know, how you would integrate that with a public NuGet feed. But when you've installed our product, you do get our NuGet packages as well. And NuGet is just really the easiest way to configure a project to work with Xamarin.Forms, because you have a lot of different projects that all have different requirements in terms of which assemblies that you need to use. So it's best to use NuGet to configure it, because it can figure out which dependencies are needed in which platform projects and such. So I just created this folder called C NuGet on my hard disk, and I dropped all of our NuGet packages in here. What you'll see is we have our offering broken down a bit into, you know, we've got our core package, we've got barcodes, charts, gauges, and grids. And so if I were to create a new project similar to how Mike did, then I'll go in here and go to blank app, and I'll create a project. I'll just call it XF Demo 3. I think I've got Demo 1 and Demo 2 already in that folder. And yeah, it'll run through a little, oh, okay. It'll take a second to do the actual creation of the projects from the template here. It seems like the screen is, the sharing is stuttering a little bit, so hopefully it doesn't fall to pieces again. So I have a bunch of projects here, and you know, they already include the references to Xamarin.Forms, but they need the references to our DLLs as well. So I'm going to open up Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. And if I click on Settings here, what you'll see is I've added an additional package source, and I've just pointed it at that folder where the NuGet packages were for our product. And provided that we have that, I can basically do a search for, you know, I'm not going to go through this stage because yesterday when I tried it, the network was a bit slow here, and that might be the problem we're having with the webinar. And so when it was trying to pull the Xamarin.Forms, it updates the Xamarin.Form package to a newer version when you install this, and it was taking too long to do that over the network. So I'm not going to go through this next stage. But once you searched for our components, in this case, you might want to install, say, the chart, because that's what we're using. Then it gives you a drop-down that shows which projects you want to install that package for, and you just install it for everything. And we'll do a little sort of cooking show cheat here and just switch to the project that I already did that for. What you'll see is that in addition to the Xamarin.Forms core and Xamarin.Forms XAML project, we also have in the portable class library, we've got these references to barcodes, charts, gauges, etc. And if I show you the same thing for Droid, then you'll see not only do we have those, but we've got a bunch of references that have .android at the end. And this is an example of why, while you can set up all those references by hand, it wouldn't necessarily be the most pleasant experience in the world, because there's different requirements as to which references are required for which projects. But anyway, so that's really all the setup required, apart from the fact that we require just a single line of bootstrapping in each of these projects. Here I'll make my text size a little bit bigger. Let me do it here instead. We just require a single line right before the Xamarin.Forms init, which happens as part of the template that you create the project from. That line is already inserted. We just require a single line here for each of the modules that you're using to make sure that they get initialized. And this is really to make sure that, really it's to make sure our assemblies don't get culled by any of the aggressive linkers that Xamarin uses while they're building for various native platforms. You want to make sure that our stuff doesn't get cut out of your project if you're trying to use it. To get into the actual app, all of the code for this app is in the portable class library up here, as was with Mike's demo. Our app is just basically creating the stocks chart page. And if I go into the stocks chart page, what you will see is that we have this XF data chart, which is the name of our data chart component on the Xamarin.Forms platform. We've said that, hey, it's zoomable. We've got a y-axis. We've got an x-axis. Our x-axis is bound to some data that's coming from our binding context. It has some settings related to its labels. Down here, we have a financial price series, which we're also binding to the financial data that we're going to be using. And we've set some other appearance properties here, and we've determined that we're reading our open, high, low, close data from properties on our data items called open, high, low, and close. And we said, oh, hey, it'd be great if we had a pleasant transition in animation when this chart loads. And if we look at what we're doing with the data, first of all, you might spy that I'm referencing the library newtonsoft.json, and I'm also referencing another library called system.net.http. These are both portable class libraries. One of them is the very popular JSON.NET library that helps you process, serialize and deserialize JSON from strings to objects and back. The other is actually a Microsoft-provided portable class library that gives you access to the HTTP client, from a portable class library. When what this lets you do is just from a portable class library, which you can run almost everywhere that you can run C# code, you can talk out to REST services, you can pull down JSON, and then you can deserialize JSON into your view model and bind against it. And so that's what I'm doing here. So basically I have this view model where I've got some, actually this is my data from, I'm talking to the Condal REST service, and basically you can see here that I'm just using the HTTP client to reach out to the, let me make the text a little bit bigger, using the HTTP client to talk out to the to that REST service, pull down the JSON string, and then deserialize it into some data. And that method is used by this getFinancialData method, which just does some additional processing on that data to figure out what columns, that REST service just provides everything in a big table, and we want to dump it into some data items instead. And so this just makes sure that everything is the right type and lets us move on. And here's the actual data in our model. We just have a financial data item which has open, high, low, close properties and a date string property. And we just want to bind against a list of those. And so that's all used by our stocks view model, where here I am I'm using a local copy that I made of that JSON file instead of the JSON file that I'm grabbing from Condal, because yeah, I was having issues with the network yesterday, and I did not want to have those during this demo. So instead, I'm using something on the local network to get that JSON file. But you know, the idea is the same. So we're making an async call. All of those were async methods to go get that data, deserialize it, and populate our view model. And then we're basically saying, hey, when that async call is done, we're going to set this status text to empty string, and we're going to assign our financial data to this data property. And so you'll see these guys just implement iNotify property change so that Xamarin will detect when those properties change and will update the appropriate parts of our UI when that occurs. So what I'll do is right now I've set the iOS project here as my startup project. This is actually, you wouldn't necessarily know it, but this is actually running on a MacBook in a Windows VM. So when I run this project against an iOS, an iPhone 5S, then what we're going to see is I can zip over to OS X here. So right now you'll see it says it said downloading for a minute, and then it's loaded all of that data into a candlestick chart. And so yeah, I can zoom in and out and pan around on this data, and it's all configured the way that that I had set up. And if we go back over here, and instead I'm going to I'll stop the project here. I'll set the Android project as my startup project, and I basically have the have it connected against an Android device running in the Xamarin Android player over on the Mac here, and so we'll be able to see the same thing running here. And you probably didn't see the nice little transition animation that played when I initially opened up the application because of the webinar. But yeah, it sort of had that transition in effect, and I can pan around. Maybe you can see the panning and zoom in and out. Yeah, I'm emulating the pinch zoom using keyboard commands. I don't know if you'll be able to see. You know, and so if we wanted to maybe make it a bit more complicated, we could come back into the XAML here, and you know, why don't we grab well here, you know, if we wanted to add a Bollinger Band overlay, you know, which is for helping you analyze analyze stock data, we can just add that as an additional series. You know, it's configured in roughly the same way into the XAML, and then we will run it again.
Stop it before you did that?
Yeah, I did.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not initially visible here. Let me just scroll
Zoom in.
Yeah, like here I'm showing you the zooming here, but more realistically, you might want to filter down your data to just the portion that you're wanting to analyze. But yeah, here the Bollinger Band, the Bollinger Bands are showing you information about the standard deviation as it's changing over the course of the data that you're displaying. And so with our data visualization controls, it's as simple as saying, hey, I want one of those, and here it shows up. And you know, there's all sorts of different ways to configure it also. So that's pretty good for a demo, I guess.
Yeah.
That
was great. I got a couple more slides I want to show with just some resources, and then we can wrap it up. But you can see how easy it was, not only for Mike to integrate in data and have a list app with drill down. Then you start looking at some third-party controls like the rich charts that we have, and even the grids and other things, and you have something that's pretty interesting. So I mentioned earlier that we just launched this new sales dashboard. Go to infragistics.com/sales dashboard, and you can download it, all the source and whatnot. Next up, we have a bunch of how-to videos on the same page, so make sure you watch our videos. Graham and his team did many of these, and they're pretty slick. And then also, we have tons of blogs. And now this is just on the Infragistics site alone. Just go to Sales Dashboard, and all these are listed. Over at Xamarin.com, you've got developer.xamarin.com, which is an amazing resource of how-tos, of tutorials, of samples. So you have a lot of resources, not only in the form of source code and samples, but you can go read the docs, read the help, etc. To get the products, just go to Xamarin.com/forms or Infragistics.com/products/Xamarin.Forms. So this is sort of the locations for you guys to grab them. The easiest thing to do, though, is after this webinar is done, we'll post the webinar, we'll post the deck, and we'll post a bunch of resources at blogs.infragistics.com. So you can just grab it all there. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and answer a few questions. One of them that came up was around MVVM tool sets, and which ones to use, which ones are better. So as Mike mentioned, you have MVVM, you have two-way data binding in Xamarin.Forms. Now the other thing is our very own Brian Lagunas has been working with some folks at Xamarin on a Prism library for Xamarin.Forms, and that is pretty robust and pretty rich. It's still in preview, so if you're going to grab it on NuGet, make sure you change from stable only to include pre-release. But that has features like navigation, commanding, event aggregation, logging. So if you're used to using Prism for your XAML apps and you want to have a similar Prism experience for Xamarin.Forms, go to github.com/Prism library, and you'll get all of that information. So let's see. I'm going to pass this one over to Mike. He might have some insights on the Xamarin.Forms version. So Mike, the question is, there's still a lot of changes. Do you work with the latest alpha beta? Are you working with a particular version? And what's the story with sort of the roadmap there, if you know?
So personally, I tend to stick in stable, just because if I go up on stage and present in front of people, it's always useful to know that it should theoretically be bug-free. So I would personally always stick to stable. In terms of the roadmap, this is something that we're going to try and fix soon, to have a bit more of a public roadmap so that people can see what's happening. But we're constantly adding new features to Xamarin.Forms. So, 1.3 added styles and behaviors, and adding more WPF goodness that people that have been using or developing modern apps, WPF or Silverlight apps, they want those features in Forms. So my advice would be, if you're developing with Forms today and you're going to release this app, then stick with the stable channel. But if you just want to have a play and you want to be on that cutting edge, then by all means drop down to alpha. But yeah, for me it's too risky, so I stick in stable.
Okay. And then another question, Mike, about Xamarin has other products, other features. I know one of them, I believe, is like a test cloud. Is there? Can you talk about test cloud a little bit? I don't know what you know about that, or anything around continuous delivery, cloud building. Is Xamarin helping us out there?
Yeah. So test cloud is our automated UI testing solution. So it's acceptance testing. So once you've built your application and you've run the unit test and you've confirmed that it should work, you ship it out to the users and they're still going to complain and give you a 1-star review and just write the comment saying it doesn't work, which really isn't very helpful for developers. So Xamarin Test Cloud allows you to develop UI test scripts that effectively simulate a user using your application. And you upload your app with these test scripts to our device cloud, which is over 1,300 physical devices in a warehouse in Denmark. And it's going to run this app on those devices and run your test scripts. And for every step of the test, it's going to take a screenshot. And if the device crashes, you're going to get a full stack trace. So you can go through the gallery and or the canvas and see how does your app look on every single device, and is it crashing on any particular devices? Because with Android, I mean, I think that it was in July when I got this number, but it was like 19,000 varieties of Android when you look at different OSs and different hardware versions. I don't know anyone that could afford to even test on 19,000 devices. So we generally say, you know, if you're not testing on 134 devices as a minimum, then you're not even covering 75% of the US market share in terms of devices. And at that point, your users are beta testing your app for you. So Test Cloud is a way to kind of solve that you get this information before you ship it out to the users. How does your app look? How does it respond? Have you introduced any critical bugs that haven't been caught in unit testing but have to be caught in acceptance testing? Yeah, I absolutely love it. But there's two parts to it. So you can actually run the UI test on a local device or in the simulator without a subscription to Xamarin Test Cloud. So it gives you 15 minutes to plug in a device and run your UI test. So I mean, that's going to solve you having RSI where you're going around the office and borrowing people's phones and plugging them in and doing the same test over and over again. So you can just, write the script once and then deploy and watch the phone effectively test itself.
Okay. What about cloud builds? Do you guys do any building cloud build features or capability?
We don't, and that is simply because Apple don't actually allow for it. So I'm quite interested in that there is a competitor that allows for a cloud building service, and I'm interested to see how they've got around the licensing with that, because Apple are pretty strict and clear that if you're going to develop for iOS, you need to own a physical Mac. You need to own genuine Apple hardware. So obviously we want to keep Apple on side. So that is a requirement that we have for you guys, that if you want to build for iOS, you're going to need that physical Mac. But you can get a Mac Mini, you can install all the tools on it, and you can set up Jenkins, and you can have all the continuous integration, so you don't actually have to physically interact with the Mac. Lots of people will buy a Mac Mini, stick a Windows sticker on it, and put it in their bottom drawer and never look at it again. And Visual Studio just communicates with it silently in the background.
And speaking of Macs and Windows, what's the difference? What's the developer experience difference between using Xamarin.Forms on a Mac with your Xamarin Studio in Visual Studio, the indie version? Is there anything you want to mention there about the differences?
So the difference is really on the Mac, you're not going to be using Visual Studio, obviously. You're going to be using Xamarin Studio. My general feeling on it is Xamarin Studio is an amazing IDE, and to me it's the best IDE for the Mac. But if you're a Visual Studio user already, which 99.99% of .NET developers are, then you should stick with the tools that you know and love, so you can continue to use ReSharper and all of the extensions that increase your productivity. There's no limitation on using Xamarin.Forms with Indie, so if you want to go for the Indie license, you can do that, but you would have to use Xamarin Studio then. And obviously, if you create your Xamarin.Forms solution on the Mac, it doesn't have any Windows Phone SDKs installed, so you wouldn't get it to generate that Windows Phone project for you. But because those platform projects really shouldn't contain any intelligence in them or any code, you can go ahead and bring the project back over to a PC, add a Windows Phone project, and just create those 2 or 3 lines of initialization to get going.
Okay. And then a couple technical questions. Graham or Mike can pick these up. Does Xamarin support XAML Reader? So can I dynamically load XAML with XAML Reader at runtime?
I haven't tried it before, so I think Mike might have to answer that.
I don't know.
I
would have to look that up. If whoever asked that wants to drop me an email, mike@Xamarin.com, I can have a look and find out for you.
I don't think that they're using binary compile XAML for Xamarin.Forms, though. So, like, unless the API is internal that they're using to hydrate the XAML, you probably can. But yeah, I haven't tried to do it before.
Okay.
I've literally just had a look on our forums, and it doesn't appear to be supported.
Fun.
Yeah. Okay. That kind of makes, when you zoom out and think about it, kind of makes sense, right? Because they're doing a lot of magic there at the compile time.
Yeah. I don't know. It's probably worth giving a feature request, though, because I'm sure they could have like an alternate path to provide that functionality, even if the core path uses some sort of optimized built version of the XAML.
Yeah, and so let's see. A couple other questions here before we let everyone go. Let's see. APIs for things like image buttons, sliders, are those available in Xamarin.Forms, Mike?
Yep, so we've got buttons, we've got images, we've got sliders, we've got a whole host. If you go to Xamarin.Forms or Xamarin.com/forms, you'll find a list of all the controls that are available to you. Okay. And then on top of that, obviously Infragistics, we've got the charting controls, but there's also Xamarin.Forms.labs, which is a package you can grab from NuGet, or NuGet, as we say at Xamarin.
Yeah, yeah.
which adds a whole host of new controls that the community has created the abstractions for. So you're not limited just by what we've got within Xamarin.Forms out of the gate. You can also add third-party controls.
Additionally, because it is so, Xamarin.Forms is so open in letting you extend the capabilities. If it's something simple, like where you want to map additional native components that they haven't wrapped as of yet, you can actually reasonably easily build your own Xamarin.Forms components that map the functionality down to the native pieces. Now, if you wanted to build something like a chart from scratch, I'd say don't be silly, buy it from us.
Yeah. Let us be those guys.
Yeah.
So there's another question that comes up a lot, and it's just about how does the size of Xamarin affect my deployed project? So if I write something just straight up Objective-C, and I'm building it on my Mac for iOS, and then I decide to write something in Xamarin.Forms, is there a size difference in the built app? Is there a performance difference? You know, Mike, do you have anything to add around that?
Sure thing. So there's no performance loss from using Xamarin. For iOS, we see exactly the same performance, and on Android, we see a marginally better performance. When I say marginal, it really is marginal. Your users aren't going to notice it, but when we benchmark it, it comes out slightly faster. So it was performance, and the other side to that question was
size. Is the size difference? Like
size, yes. So of course there is an overhead in terms of the size, because we've got to ship a runtime as well. But we link your project, so we'll link stuff away that you're not using. So when you do a release build, you're looking at about a 2 meg, worst case scenario 2 meg for most apps overhead, which, you know, when you're looking at the size of Facebook as a download, you're looking at 80 megs. So it just becomes, you know, adding one extra high-res image equivalent of. So the performance.
You'll remember from my demo too. I referenced the fact that we need you to call a little static method there to make sure that the Xamarin linkers don't try to link away some of our stuff that's dynamically loaded for each of these modules. You know, So yeah, like there's quite an aggressive size reduction that Xamarin does when you're building your app in release mode for iOS.
Well, and it's interesting too. A few years ago, everyone was so worried about size on mobile devices as far as the download, and we get all worried about, oh, it's 4 megabytes, because like a Windows Forms app would be like 200 megabytes. But now, I mean, I just downloaded like Power BI from Microsoft and some other ones, and it's like 50 meg, 60 meg.
Yep.
And so the size anymore, especially in the U.S. With LTE data speeds, some other countries, I was just in India for a couple of weeks, and 3G is where we kind of top out, so that's a little bit painful on download speed. But, the size of these apps does get much bigger and bigger, and it has to do with the graphics and the high res and supporting these big
Yeah, I'd say you're in much more trouble from needing to have Retina quality images for everything than you are from including the Xamarin, Xamarin runtime.
Yeah. Cool. So what we'll do is answer one more question, and then for the ones we didn't answer, we'll just follow up in the blog and kind of highlight the big ones. So I'll just say grab one here. Seems like this one just came along. Are the widgets used in the app pushed with the code? I'm an Android developer. Can I get into the code? Whatever. Yes, absolutely. So grab our samples. You can grab the Xamarin samples off developer.xamarin.com, and you can see the source code. You can see how the UI controls are actually used, and then you'll notice that when they're built, it's the native output. So what our product does is when we build a Xamarin project, we are using our native Android controls, our native iOS controls, our native Windows controls, and those are in your deployment package. So Xamarin's doing similar stuff behind the scenes with all of the controls that Mike talked about. So we are actually using native. You're getting that native experience on the device, which is really where the UX comes into play. It does deliver a really good experience. So with that, like I mentioned, we'll answer the rest offline. There's a few more. But I really want to thank Mike for dialing in. He's over in the UK, and it's getting late there, almost dinner time. And I think he did an amazing job of kind of giving us some insight on how the differences between Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms, when to use them, how projects work. And then I really enjoyed the Q&A here at the end. I want to thank Graham for his demo and what he's doing on the product to make sure that we're aligning with Xamarin's story. Brian Lagunas as well. He's not on the call, but his Prism library for Xamarin.Forms I think will be a really good move forward for MVVM and creating those Prism-like applications. Jess, thanks for setting this up. And with that, we will post a blog. It will have questions. It'll have a link to the video. It'll have links to the downloads. It'll have links to the Xamarin page and the developer Xamarin.com, as well as the Infragistics stuff as well. So I want to thank everyone. Thanks, Mike, again, and everyone else, and have a good afternoon, evening.